Wow, this deep dive is really something. We've got so much here from, internet speeds to plans for state-owned companies, and even Indonesia may be becoming a nickel powerhouse. I'm a little overwhelmed, to be honest. Where do we even start with all this?
Well, one thing that kind of jumps out at me is just how many of these reports are about Indonesia, taking control of its own future, whether it's building digital infrastructure or ensuring food security or even like strategically managing their resources like nickel. There's a theme here, self-reliance.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So let's start with this whole digital transformation thing. I mean, it seems like it's happening so fast. One report mentions that Indonesia's internet speed is going to jump tenfold in just a few years, going from 2.5 Mbps in 2014 to a whopping 25 Mbps by 2024. I mean, that's faster than a lot of developed countries have.
It is. Remarkable progress, really. And it's not even just speed, it's access. Indonesia has been, well, strategically building, I guess you could say, a digital infrastructure in layers, starting with the Palapa Ring project, which is, think of it like a nationwide fiber optic backbone.
Okay, I see.
Then there's the SITREP satellite, going to beam internet access to even the most remote parts of the archipelago. And then finally, you have the deployment of, well, thousands of 4G BTS towers to connect individuals and
It's
communities.
like they're building a digital highway system, making sure everyone can get connected.
Yeah.
But on that note, one of the reports also mentions that even with all this progress, there's still a pretty big digital divide,
hmm
especially in rural areas where, even basic infrastructure like electricity can be hard to come by.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Technology is a great tool for development, but it can't solve everything. You need a whole ecosystem, not just connectivity. You
Yeah.
need digital literacy, relevant content, and, supportive policies to really bridge that gap, make sure everyone benefits.
So it's about creating an environment where everyone can, not just access the internet, but actually use it to improve their lives. And while we're talking about creating a supportive environment, another issue that these reports highlight is the rising threat of child grooming online. One statistic that really got to me was that cases of online gender-based violence, KBGO, surged almost 300% during the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, that's just horrifying.
It is a very concerning trend. And child grooming, which, often leads to sexual abuse, is a particularly insidious form of KBGO. Perpetrators are, well, they're very manipulative, using online platforms to build trust with children slowly, and then exploiting that trust for, well, their own awful purposes. It's happening on social media, gaming communities, even online educational spaces.
That is terrifying. The reports mention some cases involving teachers, which really hits home just how vulnerable children are, even in places that seem safe. So digital literacy is key, not just for kids, but parents and educators too, right? To help them recognize the signs and step in before it's too late.
Absolutely. Digital literacy is vital, but it's not the whole solution. We need to create a culture of vigilance, where open communication about online safety is encouraged, and where children feel empowered, to speak up if something feels wrong. There are some promising initiatives, like the Superhero Pendidikan program in Yogyakarta, which is, well, training teachers and students to identify and address these KBGO threats. But this needs to be a nationwide effort. Parents, schools, communities, and law enforcement all need to be involved.
Okay, so moving from the digital world to economics now, there's a lot of talk about President Prabowo Subianto's plan to reform, the entire BUMN system. The reports mention possibly abolishing the Ministry of BUMN and setting up a super holding company. That's a pretty big change.
It's definitely a bold move, and to be honest, one that has been looked at before in Indonesia, but never fully implemented. So the idea is to create one entity to manage all these state-owned enterprises, maybe grouped by sector, like Temasek Holdings in Singapore or Khazanah National in Malaysia, streamline operations, improve capital management, and potentially make these companies more agile, more competitive globally.
So it sounds like the government wants to take a more strategic approach?
Yeah.
A centralized approach. But wouldn't that put a lot of power in the hands of this one super holding company? What about transparency, accountability, and potential conflicts of interest?
Those are valid points. And, those have been raised by people who are critical of this idea. There's a real need for, well, very strong oversight, clear safeguards, to make sure this super holding company operates ethically and transparently, that the interests of the nation, the people, are prioritized. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and what impact it has, if any, on Indonesia's economy.
For sure. And speaking of, Indonesia's economy, these reports also talk about food self-sufficiency. President Prabowo has said he wants to see Indonesia become self-sufficient in food production within the next, 4 to 5 years. That's a big goal, especially considering how much Indonesia relies on food imports right now.
Yeah, it is an ambitious goal. Indonesia imports, well, millions of tons of rice, wheat, corn, and soybeans every year to meet domestic demand. And while the government's planning to continue the food estate program and even expand it, there are concerns about, well, how effective it really is and its potential environmental and social impact.
Right. The reports talked about those concerns, about land suitability, deforestation, and the impact on local communities, especially indigenous groups, the ones who depend on the land. It seems like finding the right balance between boosting food production and protecting the environment and those communities is going to be really important.
It's a tough challenge, and there aren't any easy answers. The food estate program, I mean, it has the potential to increase domestic food production, but it needs to be done carefully, with a focus on sustainability and community involvement, maybe exploring alternative strategies like land intensification, crop diversification, and supporting farmers through training programs. Those things could help achieve food self-sufficiency, too.
So it sounds like there needs to be a multifaceted approach, one that takes into account the economic, environmental, and social aspects of food security.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, on a more global note, the reports also touch on the UN General Assembly. There were calls for reform of the UN Security Council there. And it seems like there's growing impatience with the Security Council's, ineffectiveness, especially with these ongoing conflicts like what's happening in Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, there's definitely growing frustration, I think, with the structure of the Security Council and how decisions are made. The veto power of the permanent members is a big point of contention. It can block action, even in cases of mass atrocities. French President Macron's statement about maybe reassessing the veto power has sparked a lot of debate.
Yeah.
About the future of multilateralism and whether we need a more just, more equitable global order.
That's a huge question. How do you reform a system designed decades ago?
Yeah.
And how do you make sure that every country, regardless of its size, has a say in global decisions? It seems almost impossible.
It is tough. But the fact that these conversations are happening, that there's pressure from emerging powers and civil society for change, well, it suggests that the international system isn't stuck. It is changing, although slowly. The question is, will it change fast enough to keep up with the challenges of the 21st century?
That is the million-dollar question, and probably one we'll be asking for years to come. But for now, let's shift gears back to Indonesia and its potential to become a big player in the electric vehicle revolution. Indonesia has the world's largest nickel reserves, and that's a key ingredient in lithium-ion batteries, the ones that power EVs. And with demand for EVs skyrocketing, well, Indonesia is in a good position to benefit from this.
Yeah, they are. Back in 2020, Indonesia banned raw nickel exports. Their goal was to build a strong domestic processing industry and capture more of the value chain. Instead of just being a supplier of raw materials, they want to be a manufacturer, create jobs, attract investment, and boost national development.
And it seems to be working. The reports say that Indonesia's revenue from nickel went up dramatically after the ban, going from 17 trillion rupiah in 2023 to a huge 510 trillion. That's impressive. But to really become a global hub for EV battery production, Indonesia needs to keep investing in infrastructure, technology, and I think most importantly, its people.
Absolutely. Developing a skilled workforce, people who can operate these complex processing plants and manufacturing facilities, that's going to be crucial for Indonesia's long-term success in this sector. It's not just about, digging up and processing nickel. It's about investing in people, giving them the skills they need to compete in this global industry.
So it's about creating a sustainable ecosystem for growth, one that helps the economy and also, empowers Indonesian workers, gives them the skills they need to thrive in this, 21st century economy.
Yeah.
That's a powerful idea. And it seems like Indonesia is actually taking steps to make it happen.
They are. It's a journey, though, and there will be challenges and tough choices, but the rewards could be huge.
Definitely. Speaking of challenges, one of the reports mentioned a new tax on heavy equipment, and it sounds like there are mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, it's a good example of, a policy that tries to address one problem but might have unintended consequences in other areas. The government sees this tax as a way to increase revenue, and they need that revenue for infrastructure and social programs. But businesses, well, they're worried about costs going up and how that might affect their competitiveness.
So finding that sweet spot, that balance between generating revenue and supporting businesses, that's going to be key.
It is. It's about designing tax policies that are fair,
Yeah.
efficient, and that don't hold back innovation or investment. And it's also about transparency, making sure that the tax revenue is used well, and that businesses have a say in how these policies are made.
It's a reminder that, every decision has consequences, good and bad, and we need to find solutions that work for everyone.
Well said. It's about making smart choices, choices that put long-term sustainability and the well-being of all Indonesians first.
And speaking of Indonesians, let's talk about Gen Z and how they feel about the job market. There's been a lot of attention on that, especially with so many young people in Indonesia.
Their concerns are understandable. The job market is changing so fast. The traditional career paths that, well, older generations followed just aren't as common anymore. Automation, globalization, the whole gig economy thing, they're all changing things.
Yeah, like the old roadmap doesn't lead to the same place anymore. So what does this mean for Gen Z, as they start their careers?
They need to be adaptable, resilient, and they need to be ready to keep learning their whole lives. The skills that are in demand today, they might be gone tomorrow. So being able to learn new things fast, being able to adjust to change, that's going to be crucial.
It sounds like this isn't just a challenge for Gen Z, though. Employers need to adapt too, right?
Yeah.
How can they attract and keep young talent, especially with the world changing so fast?
That's a big question. Employers need to see the value Gen Z brings, their unique skills and perspectives. And they need to create workplaces that help them grow and develop. Things like flexibility, work-life balance, opportunities to learn new skills, and having a sense of purpose, those are all going to be important for attracting and keeping young talent.
So there needs to be like a better conversation between the generations, a willingness to, learn from each other and find some common ground.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that each generation faces its own unique challenges and its own unique opportunities. And that working together is the key to building a better future, a more prosperous and equitable future for all Indonesians.
Now, beyond the economic and technological changes, there's also, the need to protect Indonesia's culture, its heritage, in a world that's changing so fast. One of the reports talked about concerns about globalization, digitalization, and even, internal policy disagreements and how they might impact cultural preservation.
You're right. Globalization and digital technology, they can create great opportunities for cultural exchange, for promoting Indonesian arts and heritage globally. But they also create challenges, especially when it comes to protecting intellectual property rights and making sure that traditional knowledge and cultural expressions aren't exploited or misappropriated.
It's like trying to hold on to something really precious while the whole world's spinning faster and faster. So how can Indonesia balance preserving its cultural heritage with, all these global and technological changes?
It's a delicate balance, for sure, but we can use these forces for good. Digital platforms, for example, can be great tools for documenting, preserving, and sharing cultural heritage. And if we work with communities to make sure they benefit from the use of their traditional knowledge, we can create a fairer and more sustainable model for cultural exchange.
So it's about finding ways to keep traditions relevant and accessible in today's world while also respecting and protecting the people who are the keepers of those traditions.
Exactly. It's about making sure that Indonesia's vibrant cultural tapestry continues to thrive for generations to come.
Now, all this talk about building a better Indonesia, a more digital Indonesia, more prosperous Indonesia, it all comes down to one thing: people. And it seems like the government understands that, especially with this big, ambitious plan to build 3 million homes.
It's a huge undertaking for sure. It aims to address the housing shortage in both urban and rural areas. And it's not just about building houses, it's about building communities, creating a sense of belonging, giving people a foundation for a better life.
It's a good reminder that development isn't just about numbers and statistics. It's about people's lives, their hopes and dreams.
Exactly. And this program, if it works the way it's supposed to, it has the potential to change lives and strengthen communities all across Indonesia.
But like we've seen with a lot of these initiatives, the details are where things get complicated. The reports mention some pretty big challenges: funding constraints, land acquisition issues, even the need for new construction techniques.
You're right. This program needs a multi-pronged approach. We need to find creative ways to finance it, make the bureaucracy more efficient, and make sure construction methods are both cost-effective and environmentally friendly.
It's a massive, logistical puzzle, but one that's definitely worth solving.
Absolutely. Affordable housing is a fundamental step toward reducing poverty, improving living standards, and creating a more equitable society.
Speaking of puzzles, trying to achieve energy self-sufficiency while also, transitioning to a greener energy future, that seems like a tough balancing act.
It is. Indonesia's energy landscape is, well, it's complicated. They need to boost domestic oil production to meet demand and rely less on expensive imports. But at the same time, they need to move away from fossil fuels toward cleaner, renewable energy sources.
Like trying to, I don't know, steer a ship in two directions at the same time.
Sometimes it feels that way. But it's not an either-or situation. Indonesia can do both. Optimize their oil and gas resources while investing in renewable energy technologies like biodiesel, bioethanol, solar, and wind power. It's essential.
It's about diversifying, right?
Yeah.
Finding that right mix of energy sources to meet current needs while also building a more sustainable future.
Exactly. And it's a journey that requires collaboration, innovation, and a long-term vision.
Well, I think we've covered just about every aspect of Indonesia in this deep dive. We've looked at its digital ambitions, economic policies, social challenges, cultural treasures, and even its quest for energy security. It's been quite a ride.
It has. And it's clear that Indonesia is at a crucial point, facing, like you said, both incredible opportunities and some very complex challenges.
And I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is that Indonesia's success ultimately depends on its people, on their resilience, their creativity, and their commitment to building a better future.
Absolutely. The human element is at the heart of every policy, every program, every innovation. Investing in people, empowering them, and creating a society where everyone has the chance to succeed, well, that's the foundation for a truly successful Indonesia.
And with that thought, I think we need to take a pause and come back to unpack even more of these insights.
Yeah, it's amazing how it all connects, the economic stuff, the social programs, the tech advancements, and even the cultural aspects.
Like pieces of I don't know, a giant puzzle.
Okay.
But let's go back to this child grooming issue for a second. It's something that, well, I think we need to dig into a little deeper. How do we create a safe online space for kids, especially with technology changing so fast?
It's a big challenge, and it needs a multi-pronged approach, I guess you could say. Education's key, of course. We need to teach kids how to be safe online, how to spot risks, and, who to tell if something seems off. But it can't just be about the kids.
You mean parents, teachers, even policymakers have to step up?
Exactly. Parents need to talk to their kids about online safety. Be aware of what they're doing online, but also respect their privacy. Teachers need to make digital literacy part of the curriculum, teach kids to think critically, evaluate information. And policymakers, well, they need to make sure the laws are strong enough to protect kids from online exploitation.
It really does take a village, doesn't it? Just like in the offline world. Speaking of villages, let's go back to President Prabowo's idea of food self-sufficiency and the role of the food estate program. I mean, the benefits are pretty obvious, right? More food produced locally, less reliance on imports, maybe even more jobs in rural areas. But the reports also pointed out some serious concerns about the program's impact on the environment and on communities.
Right. The environmental risks, they can't be ignored. Deforestation, when they clear land for farming, loss of habitat, biodiversity decline, and even the effect of pesticides on water and soil. And then there's the social side of things. Indigenous communities might be displaced, or they could lose access to the land they depend on. It's a lot to consider.
It is. So how do you balance the need for more food with, the need to protect the environment and the rights of these communities?
We need to make the food estate program more sustainable and more inclusive. Maybe that means choosing land that's good for farming but won't cause a lot of damage, using farming techniques that minimize pesticide use and protect the soil, and making sure indigenous communities have a say in things and that they benefit from these projects.
So it's not just about growing more food, it's about doing it the right way, a way that's good for both people and the planet.
Exactly. Food security is about more than just having enough food to eat. It's about having access to healthy food, food that's culturally relevant, and it's about making sure those food systems are resilient and sustainable for the long haul.
Okay, back to the global scene for a moment. All that talk at the UN about reforming the Security Council, it was, I don't know, thought-provoking, but also a little discouraging. The Security Council is supposed to, maintain international peace and security, but it seems like it's often stuck, especially when the permanent members' interests are at stake. Is there any real chance of meaningful reform?
It's a tough one. The way the Security Council is set up with those permanent members and their veto power, it reflects how things were after World War II. To change it, you'd need a major shift in the global power balance. And that's not easy.
It feels like, what is it, a catch-22? The countries that have the power to change things are the ones who benefit from keeping things the same.
Yeah.
So what can we do?
Well, maybe we focus on smaller changes first, like adding more members to the Security Council so there are more perspectives represented, and trying to limit the use of the veto, especially in situations where there are mass atrocities. We could also strengthen other institutions like the General Assembly or regional organizations, create a more balanced, multipolar system. Ultimately, it's going to take pressure from civil society, political will from countries, and a willingness to compromise and to adapt to how the world is changing in the 21st century.
Sounds like a long road. But it's a road worth taking if we want a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world. Now let's bring things back to Indonesia's economy, specifically their goal of becoming a major force in the electric vehicle industry. The ban on exporting raw nickel has gotten a lot of attention, but it's also brought up questions about the environmental and social impact of mining nickel. Can Indonesia become a leader in EV battery production without, well, compromising its commitments to the environment and society?
That's a great question, and it's one that, well, the government and industry leaders need to think seriously about. The economic benefits of processing nickel are clear, but they have to do it sustainably, responsibly.
So what does that look like, responsible nickel mining?
It means minimizing the damage to the environment, protecting nature, and making sure local communities benefit. It's about fair wages, safe working conditions, all the things that come with respecting workers' rights. And it's about transparency, knowing what's happening throughout the whole process, from the mine to the factory.
It's a lot to keep track of. How can they make sure these standards are being met, especially as the industry grows and the demand for nickel goes up?
It takes everyone working together. The government, industry, civil society, local communities, they all need to come together to come up with strong environmental and social protections. And then there needs to be oversight, independent monitoring to make sure everyone's following the rules.
So it's all about finding that balance.
Yep.
Economic growth, environmental protection, and social equity.
Exactly. It's about creating an industry that benefits all Indonesians, not just a few. An industry that contributes to a more sustainable and equitable future.
Okay, while we're on the topic of economic policies, let's touch on that new tax on heavy equipment. It seems like the government wants to use it to increase revenue, while businesses are worried about the impact it might have on their profits. Is there a way to find some middle ground?
It's a tough one, for sure. Governments need money to provide essential services and build infrastructure, but businesses need stability and predictability to succeed.
So how do you find that balance?
You need tax policies that are fair, efficient, and that don't stifle economic growth. You need transparency. Make sure the money is being used well and that businesses have a say in how these policies are made.
It's a good reminder that every policy, every decision has consequences. We have to try to find solutions that work for everyone.
Well put. We need to make smart choices. Choices that put the well-being of all Indonesians and long-term sustainability front and center.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the challenges facing Gen Z in the job market. The reports highlighted some anxieties about how fast the world of work is changing and the need for new skills to succeed.
Yeah, their concerns make sense. The job market's in constant flux, and the old traditional career paths, they're just not as common anymore.
Right, like that old roadmap we talked about, it just doesn't lead to the same place anymore.
Exactly. So both Gen Z and employers need to adjust. Gen Z needs to be adaptable, willing to learn throughout their careers. And employers, well, they need to recognize the skills and perspectives that Gen Z brings to the table. And they need to create workplaces that help young people grow and develop.
It sounds like we need better communication between the generations, a willingness to, learn from each other and bridge that gap.
Exactly. Each generation faces its own challenges and opportunities. Collaboration is key to building a future that works for everyone in Indonesia.
Okay, let's move on to something that's really at the heart of Indonesia's identity, its culture. But even culture isn't immune to the challenges of a rapidly changing world.
That's true. Globalization, the digital world, even disagreements within the country about policies, all of these things can threaten how Indonesia preserves its culture and protects its intellectual property.
It's like, I don't know, clinging to something precious while the world just keeps spinning faster and faster.
Yeah, it can feel that way. But there are opportunities here, too. Digital platforms, they can be a powerful way to promote and protect cultural heritage.
So it's about finding ways to make traditions relevant and accessible in the modern world.
Exactly. And it's about giving communities the power to be the caretakers of their own culture. to pass those traditions down to future generations.
So it's about balance, right? Preserving what we have while embracing new opportunities,
Yeah.
recognizing the value of traditions while moving forward with the times.
Exactly. It's about making sure that Indonesia's incredible cultural diversity continues to thrive for generations to come.
And speaking of ensuring future generations have the opportunity to thrive, let's talk about the government's plan to build 3 million homes. It's a huge project, but one that could really make a difference in people's lives and strengthen communities across Indonesia.
Yeah, it really is. Having a safe, affordable place to live, it's a basic human right, and it's so important for a stable society, a strong economy, and just overall well-being.
There's definitely a lot of buzz around this program, but like you said, there are some real concerns. The reports talked about funding issues, problems with acquiring land, and even the need for some, out-of-the-box construction methods. How can they overcome those hurdles?
Well, it'll take a multifaceted approach like we've been talking about. For funding, maybe the government could partner with private developers or international organizations, even community-based savings programs. When it comes to land, being transparent and fair with compensation, that's key to avoid pushing people out or creating conflicts. And for construction, well, there's a chance to try new things. Prefabricated homes, maybe, or using local, sustainable materials. That could save money, create jobs, and help local economies, too.
So it's about, not being afraid to think differently, finding those solutions that address the immediate need for housing while also, keeping an eye on sustainability and building strong communities.
Exactly. It's not just about putting up houses, it's about creating places where people can thrive. Strong, resilient communities.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about energy. The reports touched on Indonesia's goal of, being energy independent while also moving towards a cleaner energy future. That seems like a real balancing act.
It is. Indonesia has a lot of energy resources: oil, gas, coal, and renewables. But as the population grows and the economy expands, so does their energy demand. So the challenge is, how do you meet that demand in a way that makes economic sense and is good for the environment?
It's a tough question. Can they really increase their own oil production to rely less on imports while also investing in things like solar, wind, and biofuels? Can they do both?
I think they can, and they should. Optimizing oil and gas production, that can generate revenue and help ensure their energy security, at least in the short term. And they can use that to invest in renewable energy. At the same time, policies that encourage investment in renewables, promote energy efficiency, and start phasing out subsidies for fossil fuels, those can help create a more sustainable energy mix over time.
It sounds like a long game, right? One that needs careful planning, investment, and a commitment to innovation. But the payoff could be significant. More energy security, less reliance on fossil fuels, and a cleaner, healthier environment.
Exactly. It's about making the right choices today to create a better future for everyone.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about Indonesia's digital transformation, its economy, its social challenges, its culture, even its energy plans. It's been, well, a pretty comprehensive look at where Indonesia is now and where it might be headed.
It really has. And it's clear that Indonesia is at a turning point. So many possibilities, but also a lot of complicated issues to deal with.
And like we've talked about, I think the key to navigating all of this is focusing on people, encouraging innovation, working together, finding solutions that make sense economically, socially, and environmentally.
Absolutely. It's about making sure all Indonesians have the opportunity to thrive, and about helping Indonesia take a leading role in building a world that's more peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. But as always, we encourage you to keep digging into these issues, keep asking questions, engage in those tough conversations, and be a part of creating the future you want to see.